Sure.
Brad, I'm very happy to speak to you.
Thank you for having me back on your show, Piero. This is fantastic to be here.
Yes, so for those who may not know you, you are Brad Birkenfeld. You're the author of Lucifer's Banker. And you're the banker, and your employer was Lucifer. And Lucifer just bought Lucifer number 2, which is, so UBS yesterday just bought the second bank in Switzerland, Crédit Suisse. What's going on?
Well, the first question has to be for the Swiss taxpayers and the UBS share or Credit Suisse shareholders. The problem has always been, and I've said this time and time again, whenever either UBS or Credit Suisse get into trouble, they do not face justice, appropriate justice like anyone else would. The problem with that is very simple. You set a very bad precedent, and there's no deterrent. Hence why these acts continue to happen year after year, decade after decade. They continue to break the law, pay a fine, and walk away. But the Swiss taxpayer bears the burden because they write it off on the taxes, so the Swiss taxpayer pays that. And the respective shareholder, UBS or Credit Suisse, they pay the legal fees, which are in the millions. Why should this continue to happen? The first question is, very simply, where was the Swiss National Bank and where was the regulator's FINMA? Asleep again. Why? Greed, corruption, and cronyism. Those are the factors that deal in this society. I love Switzerland. I really enjoy it. What I don't like is when the Swiss banking system is so corrupt and people pay such a price, from clients to colleagues to shareholders to taxpayers. And that's really where this whole crux of the problem is, from lack of oversight by the regulators and the central bank, FINMA and Swiss National Bank. If they had done their job properly, they could have caught these things earlier, punished the people responsible, and put an end to it so we wouldn't be in this mess today. And I think that's really where the problem lies.
Now, UBS has bought Credit Suisse, which has on its balance books over 500 billion assets. We all know that Swiss banks have a lot of assets into real estate, into, of course, a lot of investments, but they bought this for 3 billion. Now, what's the catch in which such an imbalance?
Well, I think, again, you're seeing what I said, the greed and cronyism. There's a lot of people that are within these banks that are also in the Justice Department in Switzerland, in the political environment of Switzerland, and in the regulatory environment in Switzerland. It's too cozy. It's a boys' club. And this is something that's very, very wrong. It's a small country. It's not part of EU. It's not part of the Euro. So they feel as though they're insulated from all these other issues. That's the first problem. The second problem is that they don't punish them properly. For instance, do we really know what they've bought from Credit Suisse? Do we have a full forensic accounting of all the liabilities?
Yeah.
We do not. And as we all know from 2008, the financial crisis, there's a lot of derivatives and there's a lot of toxic assets, as we call them. Now, does the farmer in your village understand this? Does the dentist in Geneva? Does the boat maker in Zurich? Probably not. And that's where the problem lies, because these people play footloose and fancy free with all this money. And I think that's really where people are being cheated, just the normal person, man or woman in Switzerland or outside of Switzerland for that matter. So really, this has to be something where they feel as though justice is going to prevail. Bad people are going to be punished for what they've done, but you don't see any of that. Nothing. All you say is, oh, what, this one big bank is going to buy the other, merge them, and everything will be hunky-dory. Well, it's not that easy, because people are going to lose their jobs. There'll be infighting. There'll be a lot of people trying to probably take documents to protect their backside. This is far from over, and this will linger for a long time. And I think you recall, and I certainly recall, back in 1996, 97, 98, when I worked at Credit Suisse in Geneva, they merged with, they were going to merge with UBS, but then UBS rebuffed them and took over Swiss Bank Corp. So the big three became the big two. So a lot of animosity, a lot of hatred, anger, whatever, all kinds of bad things happened. It always happens, unfortunately. But that proved to show a lot of problems, a lot of bad assets, toxic assets, and so forth. And again, the greed and the corruption surfaced to the top again. And as we saw in the 2008 financial crisis, and you had the long-term capital management problem, and you've had all these scandals that have continued to plague these big banks in Switzerland, dictators and so forth and so on. The Credit Suisse with the cocaine money laundering out of Bulgaria. I mean, does it ever end? Or even the tax evasion issue in America, where they were fined. Credit Suisse was fined $2.3 billion. UBS was found guilty of money laundering and tax evasion in Paris. When is it going to end? And that's where people should say enough is enough.
Now, you've been an employee of UBS, and in fact, you tell that story, very fascinating story in your book, Lucifer's Banker. You have seen, like me, you remember when the Swiss banking corporations were very serious, very conservative, very precise in the way they would account and the way they would invest. And maybe it is still the same. It is still such into the private banks. However, at what point did you think this changed? Because what I can see from Switzerland is that, like Swissair, like other companies that have been completely destroyed, who used to be stellar companies, there's some arrogance that, especially from Zurich, like Crédit Suisse just had they had a diversity CEO for a while, just to show that they could have someone from diversities, more minorities. They had another one recently who is transgender, so another sort of minority. And what I fail to see is the professional competence. And where did it start? Where did all this mess really start, in your opinion?
Well, that's a very good point. And I think we all agree that merit-based is better than just having a token person because they're either transgender or a different skin color or a different gender than a male, a female, or what have you. And I'm not against any of that, but it has to be merit-based. You have to have people in there who are capable of doing the job. And I do recall when banks in Switzerland, the big ones, were AAA rated. Swiss Bank Corp, AAA rated. UBS, AAA rated. Credit Suisse, I believe, was AAA at some point back in the early 90s. I believe where we say the wheels came off the wagon is when they started to sort of reach outside of Switzerland and bring in foreign talent. They got a bit more aggressive. They got more greedy. And I think that's really where it really happened. It's a very good question to pinpoint when it started to come unraveled. But I would clearly say it was in the 90s that it happened. There were still very good Swiss institutions in the early 90s, but that's when I think it was starting. I arrived at Credit Suisse in 1996. So I remember the Holocaust issue and paying the $1.3 billion fine. There's another problem. And then you had the gentleman at UBS who then saw them shredding documents, and he became a whistleblower, and so on. I forget his name offhand, sorry. But you see, all these scandals have undermined credibility, have undermined trust. And as we all know in Switzerland, trust was the big factor. But now it's come out that you can't trust them because they're greedy, arrogant, and lying. A lot of people lied and stole money from clients, from the bank itself, and so on and so forth. So I think the problem we have is, as your question poses, early 90s, I think it started to erode, and their credit rating went bad. The accounting firms, KPMG, Price Waterhouse, Ernst & Young, they're responsible as well. They never caught any of these problems with long-term capital management, with the offshore banking. If you see this, you have to report it, but they never did. So there's an ingrained culture in Switzerland not to say anything, to keep your mouth shut. And that's why I did the whistleblowing I did, because I knew what was going on was wrong. And people are going to say, well, you were a part of it. I was a part of it for 4 years, really. You're going to blame me for what's been going on for the last 100 years in the big banks in Switzerland and in cities I never lived in Lugano and Bern and Basel and Zurich. So the problem we have here is people have to say, this is a wake-up call, the final wake-up call to say enough's enough. And to just add to that, I think the Saudis are going to be furious over this because they've been cheated where the law was changed to nullify shareholder rights. What happened to corporate governance in this world? So who would ever trust investing in a Swiss bank or in Switzerland for that matter if you can change the shareholder laws at the snap of a finger? This is very serious.
So in fact, this impunity seems to be in the idea of the free market is that when you fail, you suffer or you go bust, and eventually you have creative destruction that sets into place. If I take the Schumpeter idea, where you restart or you recover with a regained trust that you need to earn over the market. When Swiss government, or in this case the Swiss National Bank, keeps helping this system, it is rigging the game, as you say, and it is muddying the truth of the matter. Now, if we jump across the Atlantic, the Fed, following the recent Silicon Valley Bank almost bankruptcy, has declared, the Federal Reserve has declared that it will give unlimited support, whatever that means, to the banking sector, whatever that means. And it seems to me that we have learned nothing from 2008. We keep throwing money, huge amount of money that is printed out of thin air, diluting the currencies, creating inflation, and throwing this to markets where, especially to friends, and recently Janet Yellen just mentioned to Oklahoma board that they will help the banks where they have their friends, like Silicon Valley Bank, which contribute to the Democratic Party, but they will not help Oklahoma's bank because obviously there's no big money in Oklahoma to fund the politicians compared to California. Where is this going to lead to?
This is even a bigger problem in Switzerland, in my opinion. The Federal Reserve is a joke. Janet Yellen is a joke. She tells people to worry about the eastern border in Ukraine and how Americans must be concerned about it. How about the southern border of America first, rather than a foreign country? Just to put it in perspective for your audience so they understand what kind of nonsense that comes out of this woman's mouth. Secondly, if the Olympics were giving away medals for corruption, the U.S. Federal Reserve would get the gold, silver, and the bronze. They'd sweep it. Why? They continue to print money. Inflation, the Biden administration has spent so much money. Inflation has just evaporated people's savings and the value of their paycheck and their retirement savings. Plus, what has happened is now inflation has really taken a hold. They had to raise interest rates. By raising interest rates, it's caused everything to be much more expensive. The national debt and credit cards, student loans, and so on and so forth, which are in the trillions of dollars. So what have they effectively done is spent like drunken sailors, missed the boat on inflation, quickly scrambled to raise interest rates, and we have a nuclear bomb in the financial markets. Thank you very much, Biden administration, Janet Yellen. Useless. Even Powell, who's the head of the Fed, useless. So what we've done here is we have not learned our lesson from 2008, as you rightly point out. People have to look at this in a very simplistic way and say, wow, why did they do that? They bailed out all their friends at SVB. It's up to 250,000. Why did you make it unlimited? Because they were getting political campaign contributions. In my book of banking, that's called money laundering. You're effectively giving money to some people who shouldn't get it. They use it for a different purpose, and then everyone else pays for it. Why? This is such a serious problem, and this Treasury Department is really, really going to cause bigger problems than people realize. How many other banks out there are going to fail? But they say they're going to support it, so just print money like it's toilet paper. This is really so dangerous, and we've never learned our lesson from 2008 and 2009, which was under a Democratic administration, Barack Obama, once again. No bankers went to jail in the whole financial crisis except for the UBS whistleblower, Brad Birkenfeld. Think
Now,
about that for a moment.
of course, you want to hit the big players, like in the mob. They don't get sacrificed. Now, actually, I am a client of UBS. I don't have a lot of cash there. I have a lot of assets, and so far they've been treating me very well. I've been a customer since 1980, so almost more than 40 years. However, people should be concerned, and therefore, what is your advice? I know we're not a financial channel. We're not giving per se advice to people. However, what do we do with our money these days?
Well, it's like anything. If you are a religious person, you talk to your clergy member, which is a good thing for advice and comfort and so forth. If you have a medical problem, you talk to a nurse or a doctor or two doctors and get a second opinion. If you have a legal problem, you talk to one or two lawyers to get legal advice and compare it, not just one, but two. And the same should be with financial advice. Get it from one or two or even three people. Why? Not everyone's correct. And if you combine that, meaning you get two or three opinions, then you can make a much better educated decision. That's my first advice to anybody in the financial markets. Secondly, you should never keep all your assets with one institution. That's a bad thing. And if certain people can afford to do it, they can put it outside the country of origin. Why? Because you have country diversification, you have industry diversification, maybe currency diversification, and so forth. Just very simple things. I'm not saying to rewrite the books on finance here, just to make sure you're protected. God forbid something should happen with Bank A versus Bank B or Bank C. This is very, very healthy. Why? It makes you understand what you're being charged for fees. You can compare one bank against the other and start to think, maybe this bank is better. They're giving me better rates or better loans or who knows what. So I would recommend that people look at their entire portfolio, whether it's their retirement, their physical assets, such as a home, maybe a car, bank accounts, and other things, such as maybe artwork or jewelry or who knows what, and look at it in its aggregate and break it out into two portions and have two different people managing it. That way you can see who does better than the other, as long as it's not a real complicated situation. That's very important, and it's very healthy. Do you go to the same restaurant every night when you go out? No, you go to a different one. Why? Because you can choose to try something else, a fish restaurant versus a meat restaurant. Now, it sounds very basic, and people say, why are you making an analogy to food? Because it's like everything. You can compare and contrast. I like the meat here versus the fish there. I like the banking here versus the banking there. That's how you learn. You learn from information you gather from outside sources. And I think it's very, very important for people to do that, especially when you're seeing things like this happen in America and in Switzerland. And don't forget England as well. They sort of kept it hush hush too, but they had big problems in England. So, and God only knows what's going on in Italy, France, Spain, and so on and so forth. So I would tell that to your audience to certainly get a few pieces of advice and make your own decision. After that, it'll be more helpful, and it's free. It doesn't cost you anything.
Bradley, thank you very much. In the second part of the video, we're going to talk about gold, crypto, and your assessment of the general situation of the world.